So in today's video, we are going to be power ranking the AFC North. Now, before we get into the video, please consider liking and subscribing. And also down below, check out my Twitter if you want to. Follow me on there. You'll get a little bit of more sports stuff from me, talk about literally anything else. But if you want to follow me on Twitter, I have it linked down below. But with all that being said, let's get right into the video. So obviously these power rankings are just my opinion, and really there's not much that we can go off right now. Really all we can judge these teams is based off of the moves that they've made in the offseason, what they've done in free agency, what they've done in the draft. So at the end of the day, this is basically the teams and what they've done on paper and how I think they'll perform on paper and how well I think they're going to be next season. I'm not really a fan of any of these teams. I'm just a football fan. So really, you could say in a way I'm a fan of every team in the NFL just because I like football that much. But another note about the AFC North, I think it's probably the second toughest division in football. I think the AFC West is the toughest division in football right now. You also have the NFC West, which you could argue is up there as the toughest division. But I think the top three divisions right now in football are the AFC West, NFC West, and the AFC North. And you could say, any one of those orders could be fair. These are very tough divisions right now in football, but personally, I think this is the second toughest division in all of football. Coming in at number 4, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, this is no hate against the Pittsburgh Steelers because, in all honesty, I think there's a chance that any of these 4 teams could make the playoffs. Now, I don't have the Steelers in my top 10 in the entire NFL, but at the end of the day, they're still a team that deserves a lot of respect. They have Mike Tomlin as their head coach, a guy that's never had a losing season in his career. The dude just figures out a way to win no matter what situation that he is in. So the Steelers, they have that going for them. And so if they end up winning this division, I would not be shocked. I'm not saying the Steelers are a bad team because I don't think the Steelers are a bad team. I just think the question marks when it comes to quarterback might be the biggest issue with the Pittsburgh Steelers because they don't know if they're going to start Kenny Pickett, and we don't know if Mitchell Trubisky is going to be starting for them next season. So that is kind of a question mark, and we don't know how well those two guys are going to perform. But even with all that, you have Mike Tomlin, who's probably a top 3 head coach in the NFL, just behind Andy Reid, Bill Belichick. And so I think he'll figure it out no matter what. But they did lose some key pieces this offseason. They lost Juju Smith-Schuster, they lost James Washington, and they lost Ray McCloud. But they still have Chase Claypool, and they draft George Pickens. So they lost 3 really solid guys on the offense. But like I said, when you have a guy like Mike Tomlin, he's going to figure it out even after losing 3 fairly solid wide receivers, 3 really good wide receivers on that offense. But then at the end of the day, the defense is loaded for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think they're going to be just fine on the defensive side of the ball because when you have the defensive player of the year, TJ Watt, who I think might be the best defensive player in football, maybe 1A with Aaron Donald. I just think they're that good. And then you have Cameron Hayward, you have Devin Bush, Terrell Edmonds, Mika Fitzpatrick. You have a loaded defense for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They just added Miles Jack in free agency, and they're also a team that just made the playoffs last year. That's the thing. The Pittsburgh Steelers just made the playoffs last year. It wasn't pretty against the Chiefs. It was a pretty bad performance. But it was kind of a team that honestly shouldn't have been there. The fact that the Steelers were in the playoffs last year was good for them because Big Ben wasn't playing well. The Steelers, they just as a team weren't Steelers-like. But I think this year they're going to get back to being the Steelers that we know and love. And I'll be honest, they're a team that if they make the playoffs, I would not be shocked. But just for me personally, I think they're the weaker team in their division. It's not by much because I think what Mike Tomlin does as a head coach can set them over the top. And if they win the division, like I said, would not be surprised. Coming in at number 3 is the Cleveland Browns. Now, some people have them in their top 10 of NFL teams, and some of these people have the Browns as the top team in the AFC North. And I'll be 100% honest, I can understand that. The moves of Deshaun Watson and Amari Cooper are really good moves for the Cleveland Browns. But I have a lot of question marks with them because there's a lot of things lingering when it comes to Deshaun Watson, when it comes to Baker Mayfield. Is Deshaun Watson even going to be playing the first part of next season? Is Baker Mayfield still going to be there? Is Baker Mayfield going to play for the Browns if they need him to step in? It's just a dicey situation for me when it comes to the Cleveland Browns. And on paper, I know the Browns are should be a good football team because Deshaun Watson, while I don't have him ranked as a top 5 quarterback, because when he is playing, I do think that he's probably a top 5, definitely top 10 quarterback. But he hasn't played in a year, so it's really hard for me to rank a guy up there when he hasn't played. And we have all these other guys that did play, and we know what they did last year. But it's just a lot of question marks, too, when it comes to the Browns, because we don't know if Deshaun Watson's going to be playing the first part of next season. The distractions of Baker Mayfield, we don't know how it's going to affect this team. I'm not going to say that they're a bad football team, because adding Amari Cooper, I think was a good move for them. Obviously, adding Deshaun Watson is an upgrade over Baker Mayfield, and they think that he can get them over the hump, but I just don't know if next year is the year because of everything that has gone down this offseason. But with that being said, they're still a really good football team. Offensively, they have a great offensive line, and they have a great run game. They're deep at running back. They have 3 probably starter quality running backs in Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, and Dearness Johnson, so they have a great run game. At the end of the day, they're just going to ground and pound the football if Watson does end up missing a few games, and I think they're going to be just fine without Watson if he is suspended. Again, I don't know if he's going to be suspended. It's just a lot of question marks with them, but at the end, they also have a really good defense led by Myles Garrett, and then they also have Denzel Ward, who was just paid this offseason. So the Browns, on paper, are a really good football team. It's just the question marks that linger them kind of put me down in the rankings below, because if I don't know specifically about a team because of outside factors and it's not necessarily strictly to the football field, it's hard for me to rank a team that high. But then again, the Browns, even after a disappointing season, after making the playoffs in 2020, I don't think they're a bad football team. I think it's the same with the Steelers. I think they're a really good football team. It's just, when it comes to question marks, I really do have a tough time of ranking them higher than other teams. Coming in at number 2, I have the Baltimore Ravens. The injuries, like I've mentioned a million times, they killed them last year. If it wasn't for injuries, I think the Ravens probably make the playoffs. They were the number 1 seed week 12 last year in the AFC. They were 8-3. But then the injuries just caught up to them. They lost every game the rest of the season. But at the end of the day, if we look at the Ravens last year, yeah, they had a losing record, but they were first place in the conference at one point, and they had a winning record, and I think the Ravens are going to be just fine. There is zero chance that the Ravens are that injured next year. The injury bug just absolutely destroyed them. They lost Marcus Peters, Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, Marlon Humphrey, Lamar Jackson was hurt at times, and that obviously affected the defense, because obviously it was the worst passing defense in the NFL, but that's not their fault. They lost all their key players, all their star players. So I think the Ravens, when it comes to their team, they're going to be a better team because they're going to get back all their key players, their key starters on the defensive side of the ball, and they even offensively, Bateman missed some games. Obviously, they just lost Hollywood Brown during the draft. They traded him away, so guys like Bateman and Devin Duvernay are going to have to step up, make some more plays. But at the end of the day, I think the Ravens are going to be just fine. They're going to get all their key pieces back on defense. They added Kyle Hamilton in the draft, who I think is going to be a stud for them this upcoming season. I think he's going to make some great plays for them. It's going to help that secondary that did struggle last year. And then you have Lamar Jackson, who I think may be playing with a chip on his shoulder because he hasn't gotten that contract. He hasn't gotten paid. It's up to him. Like, I'm not saying there's an issue with him and the Ravens, but it's just going to be a year where a lot of guys are going to have to step up because they don't really have a number 1 wide receiver after losing Hollywood Brown. But at the end of the day, I don't know if it really matters because they're just going to ground and pound. They drafted Tyler Linderbaum in the draft, so that just proves that they're going to run the rock down down their throat. So at the end of the day, offensively, they really don't have a receiving threat other than Mark Andrews, who, he's a great tight end, so he may be their number 1 guy. But at the end of the day, I think the Ravens, for what they do offensively and for the defensive issues they had last year because of injuries, just injuries around the entire team, I don't think people realize how good the Ravens were last year, starting 8-3 before all the injuries caught up with them. Coming in at number 1, we have the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, they just made the Super Bowl, and I think they had probably the best overall offseason, maybe of any team this year. I would have to think of that a little bit more, but overall, I think the Bengals had a great offseason. And on paper, this team is even better than they were last year, because last year they didn't have an offensive line. Joe Burrow got sacked 19 times in those playoffs, and they got a massive upgrade at the offensive line, adding Ted Karras, Alex Cappa, Leo Collins. So the offensive line is massively improved. So Joe Burrow isn't going to hit every single play, and I think he's going to be protected much better, and I think he's going to have even more time, because last year you look at what he did with Jamar Chase with no time to throw, and great things happened, and they made it all the way to the Super Bowl with a garbage offensive line. And on top of that, they have 3 legit number 1 wide receivers on the team, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase, and then they added Hayden Hurst, so they have a stacked offense with a better offensive line, and they have a really good defense. They have a defense that isn't necessarily that has to be spectacular for them to be successful. Now, their defense was absolutely stellar in the playoffs, the interception to end the game against the Raiders, the 3 picks against Ryan Tannehill, the second half against the Kansas City Chiefs. The defense played okay in the Super Bowl. And overall, the Bengals, they have a solid defense that doesn't have to be special. It just has to be good enough. and they just added Daxton Hill in the secondary at safety, maybe corner for the Cincinnati Bengals. They still have Jesse Bates, Von Bell in that secondary. That defensive line is really good with Sam Hubbard, DJ Reader, BJ Hill, Trey Hendrickson. They have Logan Wilson at linebacker. So overall, the Bengals, their defense doesn't have to be special. It just has to be good like it was in the playoffs. And you saw what happens. Solid defense. It's nothing that's going to blow you away, but they have a solid defense. And they have guys like Jesse Bates, who they do need to pay because, you know, I don't think he should be playing on the franchise tag. I think he's that good. I think he's that valuable to the Bengals. But I think overall, the Bengals, they have a very solid defense, a very good defense, and they have an offense with an upgraded offensive line, a star quarterback in Joe Burrow, who, if he stays healthy, shown that he can be one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. 3 great weapons, 3 number 1 wide receivers on that offense, and a team that, again, they just made it to the Super Bowl, but I'm very interested in the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm interested with every team in the NFL. Let's be honest. This season, I'm excited for football. I just want football to be here. I miss football that much. But those are my AFC North power rankings. Give me your AFC North power rankings down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Give me your opinions. I'm very interested to see what you guys think. Give me your thoughts down below, and I'll see you in the next one.